Hey, this is Nick Ferguson, 10-year NFL vet, and you're watching What's Your Opinion podcast.
Welcome to the third episode of the What's Your Opinion podcast. My name is Landon Buford, and I have former defensive back Nick Ferguson on the line. How you doing today, Nick?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Just trying to, enjoy this weather outside. So, you know how that goes. In Texas, the Texas weather is a little hot out here. So,
Well, I think it's more than a little hot. Texas. I remember playing in that Texas heat when I played for the Houston Texans, and it was nothing like nice. It always felt as though your skin was just baking and frying in the sun. Like if you took an egg and cracked it on the sidewalk, you could actually cook it because that's how hot Texas weather was.
Were you playing in the Astrodome, or was it something else back then?
No, it wasn't an Astrodome. When I played, I think it was NRG Stadium.
NRG Stadium.
They've since changed the name, but in Houston, it's hot all day, every day. And then once it starts to rain, it's just almost like the humidity became that much thicker. So you learn to deal with it.
Well, me growing up, I knew that it gets too hot when you can't go swimming. You know what I mean? Like when you can't hop into a pool growing up, that's when it's really too hot. The humidity is 120. You can't even touch a pool. That's really, really hot during the summer.
Wait a minute. In my time in Houston, I've never experienced it where the weather was so hot that you were forbidden from getting in the pool.
Yeah.
We would always get in the pool as a relief from the heat.
Right.
Wow.
You have to, I'm not saying that you can't go to a pool and actually be there, but outside pools you cannot get into. You got to go to the YMCA. Now we have fitness centers, things of that nature. So.
Ooh, man, that's hot. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that heat anymore.
I miss the Seattle weather during the summers. Not during the winter, but during the summers, I miss that Seattle weather. 60, it's right around there. Once you get to August, it maybe start getting to 80, but it's nothing near to what's going on here in Texas.
Well, I tell you what, you can keep that weather. Because here, we have more sunshine here in Denver than most cities have on a regular day basis. But we do have our winters that you don't have to worry in Texas. So I don't know if you've ever shoveled snow.
Being from DC, I grew up in DC too. I had 5 years in DC. I know exactly about shoveling snow, and I was there in 96 when that blizzard happened, 95, 96 in the DC area. So trust me, I know about shoveling snow.
Oh, okay. So you know.
This All-Star Weekend in Chicago, it was snowing there, and then I've also been to New York without gloves by mistake, so I know exactly about different weather.
What do you mean in New York without gloves?
So I had to go. I used to work at Tiffany & Co. Right? So basically, we had to go out there for training because I was a security guard at one point. I had the gloves out on the bed to prepare to wear them to take them on the plane. Right? I left them on the bed.
Oh.
So. Yeah, so, and traveling to New Jersey, that's a different type of weather. Chicago, I thought it was worse, but New York weather, and I heard Minnesota's bad too, but New York weather, no.
Well, yeah, I heard Minnesota's definitely bad during the winter time, so hey. Neither you nor I have to worry about that anymore.
I felt bad for everybody that had to go to the Super Bowl in Minnesota.
Well, you know what? I was supposed to go, but I decided not to. And I'm glad I didn't because the majority of people who came back, they had the flu.
Yeah.
They had flu-like symptoms. So, yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the third episode of the What's Your Opinion podcast. My name is Landon Buford, and today we have former defensive back Nick Ferguson on the line. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm glad we're able to, finally do this after an hour of technical difficulties.
Well, it is called technology, and sometimes it doesn't always work in our favor. So, we kind of got that part out of the way, so that's great.
All right, I guess we can get started. You're a former Jet. Obviously, Jamal Adams has been in the news, pretty much all summer. If he's going to get traded, if he's not going to get traded. The Jets said they don't want to trade him, but if he caused a ruckus, we know that they would actually move him, possibly. Where do you think he would be the best fit?
Well, I know he talked about, going to the Dallas Cowboys. And, Jamal is looking for an opportunity to win a Super Bowl, as every player is. And even though, that's my former team being the Jets and they made some moves this offseason, I don't know if they're ready to compete just yet. So I looked at places like maybe, Kansas City being a landing spot for him, which would be definitely problematic for us here in Denver, knowing as though they're already fully loaded on the offensive side of the ball. But he would be partnered with another LSU DB, Tyrann Mathieu. So that would be a great fit for him. Going to Dallas, that's a great fit as well because Ezekiel Elliott is there. He's done a great job from a running back standpoint, and Dak Prescott is supposed to sign his tender, I guess, sometime today or tomorrow. So that's a team that's kind of trending upwards. And they got a new head coach in Mike McCarthy. So those would be two great landing spots. Now, there's a third, another which is in the AFC West, which doesn't make us really happy here in Denver, and that would be with the Las Vegas Raiders. So those are potential landing spots. Well, that comes to fruition, we don't know. But I know a lot of teams, and not just the Jets, the one thing they hate is a disgruntled player who's going to make life miserable for them. So we'll just have to wait to see how this plays out.
All right, let me put this here. Obviously, you're one of many successful undrafted free agents. Others, Kurt Warner, Doug Baldwin, James Harrison, just to name a few. What is the process that they go through during the draft? I know you had to go through this in 1996, but what is the process that they go through that, has them missing some of these, talented individuals like yourself?
Well, the reason is because a lot of teams have these charts. And on these charts for each position, they have a kind of a color-coded grade or a breakdown of what the players should be. So to give you an idea, so for a quarterback, you're looking at a quarterback that's maybe 6'3", 6'4", 225 pounds, their hands maybe 9.5, if not larger. So they measure players coming out by those standards. And not every player fits into that mold, even though they're great players. Case in point, you look at Russell Wilson, right? Russell was drafted in the third round. He should have been drafted higher. But because, he was a smaller type quarterback, they deemed that he wouldn't be a great quarterback because he's too short to see over the offensive line. And we've seen Russell do some extraordinary things. So when it comes to undrafted players, their teams look at you basically in that same kind of, do you check all the boxes? And some guys don't. And they also look at, well, what system you came from, what division that you played in. You might not have played in the SEC. You might have played in the Pac-12, and because they didn't get a chance to watch a lot of your games, they may deem that you are not adequate to be a drafted player. But what we've seen over the past 20 years in the league, there are a lot of players who are either drafted late or not drafted at all, who those are the guys who emerge as your stars because teams overlook them, and those guys have played with a chip on their shoulder. Let's just say Tom Brady. Brady wasn't undrafted, but he was drafted in, the sixth round, right? So that's just like being undrafted, but look how long he's played and look at the chip he has on his shoulder. So a lot of guys have to open their eyes and really look at a guy, not because of his height and his weight, but his level of production on the field. But that's why a lot of guys are overlooked.
You spent time as a coach, I mean, like a training coach in Seattle. Obviously, you got the opportunity in San Francisco in 2018. Do you think that Russell is on that list of one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league in regards to, obviously, he's got the Super Bowl, but he's never received that an MVP vote. And maybe last year might have been his best season. I know Lamar came out, strong, but for the most part, Russell was the front runner until they faced off in Seattle against each other. So do you think that he's in that regards, is he underrated?
Oh, absolutely. He's been underrated since he came in the league, and because he was not one of those first round quarterbacks, people tend to look at him as such. And I go through this with so many people either on the phone or at my station here in Denver, as far as, what type of quarterback Russell is. When you look at a quarterback, like I said, get out of the frame of mind of 6'2", 224 pounds. Mm-hmm. Now we've seen quarterbacks that are either 6'2", 6'1", or maybe 6 feet. When you look at, a guy like Colin Murray, he's not a big type of a quarterback. You fit him. You can put him in that same realm as Russell, but it's the things that he can do. Because when you look at the quarterback, it's always, can you make those off-platform throws? And what I mean by that, can you make those plays, rolling to your right on the move? A lot of quarterbacks can't do that, and sometimes they have to be stationary to set their feet. But Russell brings a whole different element to playing the quarterback position that, some just don't give credit for. But that's why we've seen the emergence of more African-American quarterbacks in the NFL, because some teams are realizing, well, that old statuesque John Elway, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly quarterback, they don't fit in today's game anymore. If you can't move and manipulate the pocket with your feet and make accurate throws, you can't play. But all you see when you watch Russell play is a thing of beauty. The guy has eyes in the back of his head, because you see defenders trying to track him down and think that he can't see them. He spins right out of it, and then now he's looking downfield to make those type of throws. So at some point, I hope soon, they give Russell his credit.
Obviously, you got the chance to see this guy play for numerous years in Denver. You're a defensive back. He's a defensive back. He's now in Los Angeles, being what's his name? Chris Harris Jr.
Yeah, Chris is an extraordinary player. He can do a lot of things here in Denver. There are certain people who love him, some people who hate him, and some of the people who hate him, they hate him because now he's going to be playing in a different uniform. But, Chris is an extraordinary player. He's joining a great defense with the Chargers, and they're going to present a lot of problems for some teams this year.
What do you think Denver's going to miss with him not being in the locker room anymore?
Well, they're going to miss his leadership and the way that he plays on the field. I mean, his nickname is Strap Harris, and, Strap meaning a really scrappy player, because he came up in the league as an undrafted player himself. So, they're going to miss that part of it, because the Broncos have a very, young core, and that's a core overall. So his leadership on the field, his playmaking ability, and, just things that he brought to not just the team, but outside in the community as well.
You had the opportunity to play under Herm Edwards and Mike Shanahan. What is the difference in how they prepare and their coaching philosophies? Like, what's the difference between the two, as far as somebody that played for under both systems?
Well, Herm is a defensive guy by nature. He played the position, so he's always thinking about things from that standpoint. Mike was a quarterback when he was in college, so he's thinking about it from, an offensive standpoint. So first and foremost, they have two different approaches. But both guys, when I look at how they did what they did as far as carrying out these schemes, they were both teachers. Herm was very adamant about being hands-on, and I know it drove other coaches crazy, but he was one of those individuals. He wanted to be hands-on. He wanted to know what's going on, and he would actually inject his teachings into what we were doing. Mike was a little different. Mike allowed his coaches to coach, but he would still kind of have his hands on the pulse of things that were going on. But both guys were calm. They were not these intense guys that were constantly yelling and screaming and using swear words when talking to their players. They allowed the players to be men. And I love coaches, but they had their different styles. But at the end of the day, when it came to X's and O's, they were both brilliant.
You also had the chance to play against Rod Smith and Shannon Sharpe throughout during your time in Denver. I guess, what was it like practicing against those two?
Well, see, Rod was kind of an undrafted player himself. So he felt that every day in practice was like game time, an opportunity to show that he still, belonged. So he never took anything for granted. And he would always press you to be better, because that's the only way that he would get better, if you presented a certain level of competition, especially if you're trying to prepare for an opponent that you're going to play on Sunday. Now, Shannon, was a very interesting character, because Shannon would tell you he was never great. He was like a superior blocker, but he would position his body between him and the ball carriers to allow the ball carrier to make plays. But he was funny. The same way you see him on air, very charismatic, he was the same way on the field, especially in practice. And he never stopped talking. He never stopped talking. Like there was one time I was covering him, and he was saying that, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do, but you still won't be able to stop it. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So he found a way to uncover, and what that means will create separation between he and I, so the quarterback can throw him the ball. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, he said to me while he was trying to run away, see, I told you I was going to catch the pass. So that was Shannon all day, every day. He made practice fun, mm-hmm. because he was always talking. He would not shut up. But that's just who he was, and that kind of filtered into ball games where he would do the same thing to opponents. He would talk trash to them while he was doing certain things to them, and it would irritate them because they couldn't stop it.
I know, like, in the NBA, they talk about, the biggest trash talkers in the game. You don't really hear much about it on the NFL side of things. I know Phillip Rivers is a talker, and maybe a couple others. But if you were to talk about your top 5 trash talkers during your time, who would they be and why?
Okay, well, so in no particular order, I would say Shannon, Phillip Rivers, D'Angelo Hall. Who else would I throw in there? One of my former teammates. He's no longer alive, but mm-hmm. when he was, he definitely talked trash. Darren Williams was mm-hmm. definitely a trash talker. Who was another one that I've been around who talked trash? Usually it's always either offensive guys or defensive guys. So Brandon Marshall talked trash too as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You also got a chance to play with Andre Johnson in Houston. Yeah. And what's the difference between him and Rod Smith as far as preparing at the position? Because obviously Rod was, he was very durable, and Johnson was obviously, he had a decent career, but injuries got him at the end, right? So, what was the difference in preparation? I guess you could say.
Well, here's the thing. There wasn't like a huge gap as far as how they prepared. I would say there were more similarities than differences, because Andre was drafted. He was drafted in the first round, mm-hmm. and Andre, every day he came out to practice. Once again, I mean, he was really sharp and crisp with his route running. He was very aggressive as far as blocking defenders, whether that was a safety, corner, or linebacker. So both guys approached the game from a live game standpoint when you're facing another opponent, and practice the same way. It was always about trying to be better, trying to be a leader by everything that you do, and just kind of trying to set the tone. So they were more alike than they were different.
Okay. I guess from an analyst's perspective, because obviously you're on radio, how do you feel the business has changed since the COVID-19 pandemic has started? Because I know there's been a lot of people being laid off. You got to have a specific niche to have them keep you on. You got to be a personality. You got to be a popular personality. So how do you feel like it's changed, and how do you think it will be going forward after we find a vaccine for this this virus?
Well, it's changed because it forced everyone to just kind of change how they consume, sports media. And it's forced the NFL to change how they present the draft. Just last night, we watched the ESPYs, and it was an entirely different look from what we've seen it before. So it's forced everyone to kind of adjust to, I don't want to say the new normal, but the current normal right now. How we present our content and how we consume our content, because there's more people now consuming sports media through, apps like this, like Skype or Zoom, or just, on their phones at all, because we don't have sports. So it's forced us to look at different ways to consume and present, sports media. And you're right, when it comes to sports media, there are a lot of companies who've had to cut back, either furlough a couple of their, people in their talent, or just eliminate it in its entirety, which has proven to be very difficult for individuals who've worked, so many years trying to hone their craft in broadcasting, or individuals who have been at the tops of their game for so many years. Now everyone is trying to do something a little different. So now we're seeing more podcasts pop up, people using the social media platform in different ways that they didn't use it before.
Obviously, former 49ers quarterback, Colin Kaepernick's been a big topic, I guess, ever since he was opted out of his contract 4 years ago. A lot of people are comparing him to Ali. Do you see that comparison? Because they missed time in the prime of their career because of something that they stood up, that obviously they stood for. So do you see the comparisons? Is it any different? I mean, from your opinion, do you see any difference between the two of them?
Well, they're trying to make the comparison to Colin and Muhammad. I can see why people make that comparison, because both guys kind of, stood up for something, and they lost a significant amount of time. But I think if we're going to make that comparison, the best individuals to make that comparison to is, you go back to the 1968 Olympics in Mexico, where you had John Carlos, Tommy Smith, and Peter Norman, right? All three guys, when they went back to their countries, Peter to Australia and Tommy and Johnny to the United States, there was a lot of, media backlash as to why they did what they did. So I would compare what Colin did more so to that movement than maybe more so Ali, because you look at what people were saying then as they're saying now. Sports and politics don't mix, right? But when you look at what Colin did, it had nothing to do with anything military-wise or political-wise, but the story was crafted to make people feel that way, because individuals feel so strong about the American flag and about the military. So to know that Colin missed 4 years of his prime, and may not ever play football again, to know that, John Carlos, Tommy Smith, and Peter Norman, they were not allowed to run in any Olympic races after that, and what those men had to endure as far as, the hardships that their families suffered, and then you look at the financial hardships. That may be a little different with Colin because we live in a different time where, Colin now has Nike that can actually fund him financially, whereas those guys didn't have that. So it is a very crazy time, but I would, look at Colin as to what happened in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico.
I know recently Mark Davis came out and said that he gave his team personnel the option to sign him back in 2017. Obviously, that hasn't happened, but the Chargers recently said that they would think about bringing him in for a workout, and Pete Carroll has been vocal, but basically recently said he doesn't have any desire to sign him because they have Russell Wilson. But right now they don't have a backup quarterback. They're talking about bringing Geno Smith back in, but obviously I feel like, me personally, I think Colin Kaepernick is a better talent than Geno Smith coming off the street, right? Where do you think would be the best fit for him if he was to get an opportunity this coming season?
Well, there's 32 teams in the NFL, and all 32 teams are viable options. Now, some people will tell you or have you to believe that's not true, because when Colin was blackballed, and this is call it what it is, from the NFL, everyone continued to kind of push the narrative, well, it's because he can't play. And if you bring him in, you have to change your system. Then it was a lie, and it's still a lie today. Because every offensive coordinator has to, if he's smart and he's competent, he changes his system to fit that of his quarterback. And the system changes every week depending on who you're playing. So when you look at where you have African-American quarterbacks, there's an opportunity for him to play. And if there is an African-American quarterback who's starting, I would say that that quarterback who's starting has the same attributes as a Colin Kaepernick. They're mobile. They can throw on the run. They put pressure on the defense because their athleticism. You look in Buffalo with Josh Allen. You look at Arizona with Kyler Murray. The Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson. You talked about Pete Carroll and, Russell Wilson, right? Geno Smith and Colin Kaepernick. Who do you think would be a better option? Even being out of football for 4 years, I would say Colin, based on what they like to do, what Shanahan likes to do with Russell Wilson and the skill set that he displays. Here's the only problem with that. When you look at the Seattle area, there's a large amount of former or current military that live in that area. And, they've gone on record and saying, okay, well, they don't want Colin there. And if so, if he were to come, then they're not going to support the team. So that's the reason why Colin wouldn't be with the Seattle Seahawks, not because you have Geno Smith. Anyone who knows football will tell you, when you compare Colin to Geno, which quarterback has been more successful? It's Colin. He's been to a Super Bowl, right? But, Geno hasn't been there. So to me, I just get tired of these false narratives as far as what people say about, Colin. I hope he gets another shot. You mentioned Anthony Lynn with the Chargers. That's an opportunity for him to be there. Easton Stick is the third-team quarterback. But if you're asking me, well, you have Tyrod Taylor, you have Justin Herbert, and Easton Stick. Well, heck, I would bring in Colin Kaepernick to let him compete with Easton Stick and see where Justin Herbert is as your quarterback. So you lose nothing, but you gain everything by bringing him in. But it's all up to Colin whether he wants to play football or not.
And then obviously you mentioned in Seattle they have all the military. I think it's maybe Fort Hood. I might be mistaken on what bases in Seattle, but or not Seattle, but down in the at the end of the state. But I know that they were looking to go after the XFL quarterback that was very shifty. I don't know his name, pardon me, but that's why I feel like Colin would have been a perfect fit there because of the athletic ability he possesses and the gadget plays that they can do between him and Russ. Kind of like what the Saints have done with their tight end / quarterback, and who they just brought in, I think was in the 6th round or something of that nature. But do you think Cam would, being that there's no issues with military situation because of kneeling and things like that, but do you think Cam would be a better option to fit the bill? Because I know that his name has been floated around as a possible backup to Russell Wilson next year as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, once again, Cam fits with all, 32 teams. Well, maybe I should say 31 because the idea of him going back to the Panthers, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But, there's room for Cam in this league. The concern has always been, is he healthy? And mm-hmm. before, people were saying, well, he wasn't signed because at the beginning of COVID, they couldn't travel around and actually have their doctors lay eyes and hands on him. But mm-hmm. that's a fallacy because you can do that now if you want to, right? Mm-hmm. You can have him go to a facility and have, a doctor check him out and mm-hmm. then give those results back to whatever team, who wants to bring him in, give those results to them. But once again, the ball is in the court of these organizations. No one can force them to do something that they don't want to do. If they don't feel as though Cam fits what they want to do, or if they feel as though he may threaten the person that they're having start now, then that's a concern for them. But do I feel just like with Cam as I do with Cap that they would be viable options for any teams? Absolutely, because these are guys who have started a multitude of games in the NFL. These are guys who have shown that they can get to the Super Bowl. So mm-hmm. why is it that they don't have a job? It's based on those teams and whether those teams want to bring them in or not.
I know that during, I guess, with Kaepernick's, protesting and things of that nature, he's also been compared to Melo because Melo lost a year of his career last year. Thank God the Portland Trailblazers picked him up. But do you can see the comparison as far as people of them were blackballed at some point in their career? And I know Royce White, made a lot of noise last summer, putting Michelle Roberts, who's the representative for the Players Association, and then also LeBron and some other people that from a video that went viral last summer. So do you consider that any comparison there?
Well, the only
because Melo's also marched too. Melo's marched it, for civil rights and stuff like that too. He's the only athlete in the NBA that's marched. So do you see the difference between the two, or similarities between the two?
Well, the only reason they're similar is because we're talking about both are African American professionals. One plays in NBA, one plays in NFL. Also, the fact that there was some significant amount of time that was missed, and the fact that there might have been some rumblings throughout the NFL and the NBA that these players had nothing left in the tank. And when you look at that situation, and Carmelo is a great example, that it looked as though no one was going to pick him up. Every place that he had gone, from Houston to Oklahoma City, it wasn't really working out. And luckily, Portland decided, hey, we're going to give him an opportunity. And he's done a great job with the opportunity that he's had. So much it's kind of revitalized his career, because sometimes you don't know you don't miss the water till the well runs dry, as the saying goes. And maybe there were some times in his career, whether it was here in Denver or with the New York Knicks, where he didn't really push himself the way that he wanted to. I'm sure that he would agree to that, but his situation wasn't just solely, his fault. I mean, there's a little, that has to do with Carmelo, but now, like I said, it's kind of a revitalization of his career. He loves the game again. He gets a chance to be around other NBA players, and it also helps when you have powerful friends who are the face of the NBA, like LeBron James, who can, talk to other teams for you, post videos saying, okay, listen, this is why my guy should be back in the NBA. So maybe something like that happens for Cam Newton. And maybe we need something like that to happen, because maybe it's Colin who helps Cam, or maybe it's Cam who helps Colin by, being on the NFL team, showing as though they still have it?
Dak's obviously about to get paid this eventually. Depending on where he sets the market, obviously that's gonna trickle effect for Mahomes, Watson. Lamar might get paid. I mean, Lamar's going to get paid eventually. Russell's contract's up in, I think, 2 years or something like that. So he's going to re-up. It might be his final contract. But as far as, and all of them are African-American, coming from the fact where at the beginning where Warren Moon and those guys weren't allowed to play the quarterback position in the NFL, what are your thoughts about that? That maybe 3 or 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the next 3 or 4 years could be the top 5 highest paid quarterbacks in the league?
I think it's a beautiful thing because you look at where the African American quarterback has come from. Mm-hmm. And just for the sake of conversation, I'll say African American quarterback because I just call them quarterbacks. There shouldn't be a differentiation between the two. And it was a long time coming. And when you look at some of the quarterbacks that have paved the way for what guys are dealing with now, you look at Warren Moon, Brandon Cunningham, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of to name a few, Doug Williams being another guy. So I'm sure those guys were staying proud to see what's happening, and that would not only show that some teams have changed their minds about how they viewed African-American quarterbacks and view them as being leaders and the face of their franchise, but also how the game has changed where African-American quarterbacks before cannot really display their skill set because if you display an athletic skill set, you were deemed to be just that, an athlete and not a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And when they look at guys who are athletes and they play the quarterback position, the mindset is, those guys are not going to look downfield and go through their progressions. Those guys are going to look to run first before anything else. I mean, you look at the way that the game is played now and how defenses struggle to try to keep pace with teams who have mobile quarterbacks. It's telling us the direction of where the game is going. And to know that eventually we could have 3, 4, maybe 5 of the top quarterbacks in the league, all being African-American, but all being the top money earners. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think if you're a kid in the inner city right now, or even in, suburbia in America, and you're an African-American quarterback, you look at this and you say, wow, that dream of leading an NFL team is now more real now than it was 30 years ago. So I applaud and I love the fact, and I can't wait to the day when that happens.
I talked to about this maybe 2 years ago now, because I think he got into the Hall of Fame 2 years ago. It was right before. He said that he's happy for these quarterbacks to be making, the top dollar that they're making. But, people like yourself, people, play different positions, are also looking for that big payday. I mean, maybe half of what the quarterback is getting. Do you see that ever happening at some point? And how long do you think it might take before other positions start seeing those, I guess, more decent amount of pay raise, I guess you could say?
Well, players are making more money in today's NFL than they made when I played and even before I played. We've seen a lot of guys with more guaranteed money, and that's the thing that you can count on because you see a guy with a contract worth $100 million. So you have to say, well, how much of that is guaranteed? And some of that contract may be backloaded. And every player now wants to be the highest paid player at their position. We see it with the quarterback position because it is deemed to be the most important position, in all of football. I have my disagreements with that because, football is a team game. It's not an individual sport. And with the elevated salaries of quarterbacks, it's going to diminish other positions. Just think about the running back position. That position constantly is being diminished. So they're looking to pay guys less at that position. And if we have more guys moving to be the highest paid at their given position, it's going to put the NFL in a very tough position itself, because you're paying so much money to a smaller group of guys. How do you fill a team that's really competitive? So they have to somehow figure that out. I do believe that players should get what they're worth, but the market dictates that. When you had a guy like Kirk Cousins get a 3-year contract with the Vikings, and $98 million of his contract was guaranteed for a guy who never won a playoff game, a guy who's never been to the postseason, a guy who's never, made the playoffs. And then Aaron Rodgers comes out right after Matt Ryan, and he was like, well, if Matt Ryan is going to get a $100 million deal, I want more than Matt Ryan. So with that being said, we still have to talk about, Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes can end up making $50 million a year, which is unheard of. It's unheard of. He could be the first $200 million quarterback, right? So now, if that happens, that's the market. Now, let's say Lamar Jackson goes out this year and he wins the Super Bowl, right? And his contract is up. Guess what that puts the market now?
Right.
It keeps going up. So I want to see every player make as much money as they can, but it's going to position or put the league in a position where they're going to have to put some guidelines in place to control this.
You said $200 million. I'm saying $300 million for Patrick Mahomes. So possibly, right? Possibly, because if Dak, they said Dak wants. He wanted a 5-year deal, 6-year deal, and it would have put him in the 250 range, right, for what he was looking for. So if that's his case, Mahomes roughly could command, because he just won a Super Bowl, right, the $300 million next year, right? So, do you ever see the NFL not having a salary cap? Because, I mean, like you said before, they're going to have to go, at some point trying to build teams. If your quarterback is taking almost 50% of your revenue, right, or your salary for a season, do you see them going to the not having the salary cap, kind of like baseball, in some instances?
No, I don't, because here's what you would have if they went that direction. So that means that the teams who are very successful with management, player development, right, hiring the right coaches, then they're going to have the money to sign the players. So you look at baseball, right? You look at the New York Yankees. So they're like, well, we're going to buy ourselves a championship. Right. We're going to spend more money than you. But if you're in the market where your team does not make as much money per capita as the Yankees, you're always going to be a bottom dweller. And the league is always about bringing balance. That's why every year we always see 5 teams that make the playoffs one year, they don't make the playoffs the following year, right? So I wouldn't like to see that, because now the teams with deeper pockets, they can field a team that is constantly winning Super Bowls. And just think about it this way. As a sports fan, right? Most people were upset when the Patriots continued to win Super Bowls, right? And they did that with a balanced, salary cap. So imagine if there was no cap at all and you could spend as much money as you want. What do you think happens? Then you may have a situation where, the Patriots are winning Super Bowls for the next 20 years. No one wants that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess this year they might not have. Well, it's looking like they're not going to have any crowds in the stadiums, right? If you were playing in this predicament, how would that affect your game? And how do you think it's going to affect the game this year with not having fans in the stadium? Because places like Seattle, Kansas City, they feed off of their fans, the loud noises and things of that things of that nature. So if you were playing in this era, how would you be able to deal with not having fans in the stands?
Well, that's just it. You just have to deal with it. You have to learn to adjust. Now, fans are a key part of any sporting event because they elevate you when you're down. They get you up ready to go. And not having them in the stands, it definitely changes what you can do. Now, there's pros and cons to it. Usually you talked about Seattle and you talk about Kansas City. The crowd noise helps the home team because it makes it difficult for the opposing offense. But just think, if you're a team and you roll into Seattle or you roll into Kansas City, you don't have to worry about crowd noise. You have to figure that that's a benefit. That's an advantage for you. So opponents love it. Home teams, they don't. And if you are a player just like I was, and you fed off that energy, it definitely changes the way that you approach football and how you play it. But I think if you play enough games where there are no fans in the crowd, you start to prepare and you start to get used to it. It's no longer a shock to you, right? It's one thing if you start off the season with fans and then you reach the point where you don't have fans, then that becomes an issue within of itself. So the idea is, like anything, you have to learn to adjust.
And then final question. This is the time in the interview that I like to ask some of the things that you're doing outside of football, maybe, different businesses that you're starting, things of that nature. Like, what are you involved with when you're not hosting your radio show?
Well, for me, man, it's all about being the best dad and father that I can be. That's the best business that I can be in. And for me, that's something that definitely fulfills me. Outside of that, man, I'm either, playing games with my kids, watching movies, or, I'm on social media because it's a great platform to engage with other people, to kind of educate them and enlighten them on certain situations that they don't really know about as it pertains to sports, things that are happening in society now for as far as the demanding change for social change. So those are the things that I'm involved with. I haven't really started a business per se, but I constantly get nudged by my friends to write a book, right, about my experiences in the league and my process. So I haven't really started that. So if there's going to be another project, that would be the first project, trying to get that book out.
Okay.